What up, guys? Welcome to another edition of the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. Today, Eugene and I are going to talk about a question that was sent to me, and in particular, talk about the idea that this person sent me, which his coach told him, which is the gi more technical than no-gi? This is what this person said. You listening to this, you might have particular sort of a knee-jerk reaction to that statement. Maybe it irritates you. Maybe you're like, yep, it is more technical. Or maybe you're kind of indifferent. But we're also going to talk about that and not religious, but martial arts dogma. And again, it's something that I think a lot of times jiu-jitsu practitioners like to think that they're not involved in this, but they are. And a lot of times you see this dogmatic approach in jiu-jitsu in multiple different places and in multiple different ways, and we'll talk about it. And you can use this as just an idea to chew on, of course, but especially with the dogma part. I'll talk about some of the dangers of getting too dogmatic about jiu-jitsu because I've seen it happen. And so I'll share some of this with you and just sort of from the vantage point of maybe helping you just make sure that you steer clear of it because you don't want to be like that. Big thanks to our sponsors for helping make this podcast happen. Charlotte's Web. You can check them out at charlottesweb.com. Charlotte's Web is a CBD company. They make amazing CBD. They're third-party tested. They have options for you, whether or not you have to be tested or not tested. And I say that because one of their products is USADA NSF certified. And basically, NSF certified sport means that if USADA came to your door and made you test, that you would be safe, right? Which is a pretty stringent testing regime. Now, obviously, if you do get tested, do your research. But again, CBD is one of those things. I like it for recovery. A lot of people train hard. You get after it. You eat a good diet. You try to get enough sleep. You do all these things. And at that point, supplementation is the last little bit to add into it. And for me, CBD a lot of times helps sort of add that little component at the end. I like taking it before I go to bed at night. It seems to help sort of improve my sleep cycles, and I seem to have a benefit from it. So I encourage people to try it out for a month, see what kind of effects you have on it. And again, if you want to try out some of their CBD products, whether it's the gummies, the tinctures, which are the little droppers, whatever it is, you can check it out at charlottesweb.com. And the promo code is JiuJitsu20 for 20% off. Also, thanks to Epic Roll for helping support the podcast. If you guys have never been on to Epic Roll's website, check them out, epicrollbjj.com. Lots of cool gis, rash guards, shorts, t-shirts, gear, the whole thing. Cool designs, high quality stuff. And again, if you just are one of those people, sometimes you like buying some jiu-jitsu stuff like we all do, just get on there, epicrollbjj.com. And if you find something on the website that you like, use the promo code jiu-jitsu for 15% off. I would encourage you to maybe check out his no-gi shorts. I like them. I think they're very, very comfortable. They've served me really well. I've got a couple pairs that have lasted for several years now, and they're still going strong. So check them out at epicrollbjj.com. Also, thanks to Choke Coffee Co. You can check them out at chokecoffeeco.com. They are a coffee company, obviously, that is surrounded by jiu-jitsu. It's made by jiu-jitsu guys. They offer small batch roasted to order coffee delivered fresh to your door. I like the names of them. They've got their light roast, their breakfast blend is white belt tiers. They've got Bolo blend, smash and pass, and snap, tap, or nap, which is a decaf. So I think, Eugene, you had the white belt tiers, which is their breakfast blend.
Yeah, it was good. Excellent. Really smooth, actually. I liked it.
I think I may have had the Bolo blend, which is like their espresso blend, which has got, they say, hints of chocolate and caramel. Tastes pretty good. Again, I like the coffee that I had. It was pretty good. And again, you guys can check them out if you want to. They have regular ground coffee. They can send you the whole beans. They can also do the K-style cup things. Although, I mean, this is just me. If you're going to drink coffee, like if you're going to go through and drink coffee, you need to make that stuff. Get yourself like a good either a good drip machine, like a really good drip machine, or just make it like a pour over, or there's lots of different contraptions, or a French press.
Yeah.
I don't know, the K-style cups, man. I guess they're convenient, but I just don't think the coffee comes out very good.
Yeah.
And I've even done taste tests with people. I've actually put like a case. I've actually made cups and like, here, try these different ones that I've made with like French press versus an AeroPress versus a pour over versus a K-style. The K-style never ranked up very well. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents on that. If you're a coffee person, and again, one cool thing about them is a portion of their sales goes to Guardian Gym. We actually had the original founder of Guardian Gym on the podcast like years ago, which is cool because basically they're like a nonprofit jiu-jitsu organization that goes into areas to support jiu-jitsu in under privileged places, right? Where these kids can do something to get them involved in some sort of cool program like jiu-jitsu that can help benefit their life, get them off get them off the streets, we would say, keep them busy, doing good things and being around good people. So again, it's a cool mission behind it, right? Supporting those kind of organizations. And if you like coffee and you would like it small batch roasted and delivered fresh to your door, check them out at chokecoffeeco.com and use promo code JiuJitsu for 10% off. Also, if you want to support the podcast directly, you can do so by going to our Patreon at patreon.com/the-jiu-jitsu-podcast. Also, now we will be releasing this ad-free to you on the Patreon. So if any of you guys do not like the ads, which some Eugene got really upset because some goofball on Reddit was like getting upset about the ads. I'm like, every podcast has ads. It's like everything has ads. TV commercials have ads. You get on YouTube, there's ads everywhere. It's how things pay. It really comes down to that. It's like which is fine. If you don't like to pay for things and you want them free, that's okay. But free, there's no such thing as free, right? Someone has to pay along the way. Right. And someone has to offer something. Now we try to make the ads as reasonable and as real as possible. He said the word shilling, and it's interesting because shilling to me, maybe I just don't know the definition, but shilling is like always kind of like a derogatory term. I don't share any products I don't like. As you know, Eugene, we've been offered a lot of stuff to share that we have never shared with you guys once. So anyway, that said, if you guys would like to listen to the podcast with no ads, you can do so by going to our patreon.com/the-jiu-jitsu-podcast, where we'll be releasing the audio versions ad-free, and you get access to the exclusive library that's been building up for over 3 years on there.
And we'll be starting with this episode. They're going to be ad-free on there, starting episode 262.
And if you guys want to get my daily email, you can do so by going to my website at chewjitsu.net/join, JOIN. Upon joining, you'll get access to some exclusive free ebooks that I give away, and afterwards you will get my daily email. So with that out of the way, guys, let's talk about this idea. So recently I was talking to a person through my email. Again, if you want to send email questions, that's the way to do it. You jump on the email list. And he was saying that he has a history of getting his fingers dislocated. Just some different things that had happened. And so he kind of doesn't really like the gi, but he still does it, of course. But he was talking to his coach about, hey, what are some things that I could do to work around this injury that I have with my in particular, a couple fingers dislocating. His coach gave him some good ideas and some ways to work around that to help improve the situation. But he said at one point, the coach told him that the gi is more technical than no-gi. And every time I hear that, because I heard the same thing back when I was getting started. It's such a weird thing. I never believed it even back then, but I would listen to it and go, maybe they have a point. I don't know. Because back when I'm a white belt, blue belt, I'm thinking to myself, I only started this a couple years ago, a year ago, whatever. So maybe I don't know. But as someone that's been doing this stuff for over 20 years, I think that's a bunch of junk. I don't think that
100%.
one's not more technical than the other. And you also, here's what you have to do. And this is something you guys can take this. When someone says something that a lot of times I encounter to be very vague and like not really all that descriptive, I always ask them, how do you mean? Like, so for instance, if someone says, oh, it's more technical. Okay. Well, how do you mean more technical? Right? What like when we say technical, what is our definition that we're working with? Because a lot of times people will say things, and they'll say things because they heard someone else say it. They'll say things because it validates their particular worldview. And they'll just say things and they don't really define what it is they even mean. And so if you ask someone, well, what do you mean? How do you mean technical? Can you explain that to me? What does it mean to be technical? And I think that a lot of times what they mistakenly think is technical is just slower, right? Because in gi, you can move typically a little bit slower, not always, but you can typically move a little bit slower because of all the gripping. and there are typically a lot more options and techniques for moves because of the fact that you have lapels, you have handles everywhere, right? So you have all the same things from No-Gi pretty much, but now you have on top of that, you have all these like grips all over the body. And so you could, you say, well, there's more techniques there that, and then that might be a possibility. But to say it's not technical, I mean, when you go with someone in No-Gi, I mean, they're using techniques, right? And some of the people become very technical in No-Gi. And this is why if the gi was somehow inherently better than the No-Gi, right? Well, then all the gi champions would just come over and take the No-Gi. Now, this used to happen back in the day when basically you'd have guys like Marcelo Garcia, who's just, the GOAT, whatever. But especially now, you don't just see the gi champions come over and just win No-Gi. And you don't always see the No-Gi guys go over and win the gi, right? There's a few in there that will do both, but a lot of times, and a lot of times the gi champions will do well, like say in the ADCCs and things like that. But again, you don't simply see like one. It's not that the gi guys are so much better and the No-Gi guys are so much better. And I'm not making a case that one is better than the other. I think that the two are like almost like twin brothers, right? If you have brothers that grow up, they could be twin brothers. They could look, they come out the womb basically the same, but they're still different. They do things differently. You can even people that do the same darn thing, like Cade Rotolo and Ty Rotolo, they're still very different. They still have a lot of similarities with what they do. They still have differences when they grapple. And if you have someone who grows up with a brother or a sister or whatever, a lot of times, and this has been done plenty of times, where you'll have them and they go in two different life trajectories, right? Again, same person kind of in a way, but again, two different trajectories. And so I think that, again, they're very similar, but they're still different. But the similarities are more, but I don't think that you can just say it's more technical than the other. And I think what that really gets to is just at its core is martial arts dogma. Basically you can think of this is a human thing. It's very tribal. My stuff is better than your stuff. My martial art is better than your martial art. That was a big one back in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, right? Like my martial art's better than yours. Then the UFC comes along, right? And then it became with us with jiu-jitsu. Okay, jiu-jitsu is pretty good. Okay, well, my style of jiu-jitsu is better than your style of jiu-jitsu. And then now that whole argument starts.
Yeah, like as far as when I when I hear that gi is more technical than no-gi, you might be right in a sense of what they mean as there's more techniques or more like variety of techniques. But as far as something being technical, I think it's like how skillful. Like we have Evan at the gym who basically does only no-gi. He's a black belt, no-gi, phenomenal leg locker. I would say I probably do more gi than no-gi. But when I go take one of his classes, Evan is extremely technical. There's a lot of specific instruction on grips and control positions and leg placement and just things like that. So like, I think that just because you have more techniques available, possibly like maybe you can use a lapel for squid guard and all these other things, just different type of lapel guards and lassos and things like that. That doesn't mean it's more technical. There's more techniques, but you can be just as technical in no-gi as you can in gi. And in some instances, you have to be more technical in no-gi. I'm sorry, because you have to be so precise with certain controlling positions because you don't have grips. So, I mean, you might even argue it the other way. Like you have to be super technical. Like, I mean, if you're not great with your controlling positions in no-gi, somebody can slip out fairly easily.
Sure. And you can also have a lot of trouble. Like it's much easier to deal with very athletic people in
100%.
gi than it is no-gi. And in no-gi, it can still be done, but you have to know how to do it. And the grips change a little bit. Like the gripping is there's still a very much a style of gripping and learning how to, what I consider learning how to latch onto people's actual joints.
Yeah.
In no-gi versus in gi, where you can just grab the sleeves or whatever else. It reminds me honestly, the gi like being more technical is a very old argument and most people don't agree with it anymore now, but it reminds me of the not so distant argument of leg locks don't work leg locks are, you're losing control of the person. You can insert whatever you'd want to. There were tons of excuses about why leg locks weren't good back in the day. I mean, when I first started, leg locks were considered to be, you would
Dirty.
learn them, but they were dirty. And it was almost, if, again, maybe this will bother some people, but it was almost like you weren't a man if you had leg lock someone. You know what I mean? Kind of like, how there's like, if you get around a group of men, especially back in the day, there used to be like this like manly code, right, of different stuff. And it could be like, you're not manly if you can't do this or something like that, and there's certain things that all of us men, we like puff our chest up about that we can do. And leg locks to me was like, it was like almost like one of those things where you do it, but it was almost like you were being cowardly, or you were being sneaky, or you were being, not quite manly because you didn't smash the guy's guard, take his back and choke him, or, whatever submission it was.
Yeah.
And obviously there were tons of holdouts to the leg locks in jiu-jitsu, and they said that they didn't work, and they had all these derogatory things to say about them. And obviously they were pretty much wrong, because there's a ton of control available with leg locks, and it doesn't necessarily always put you at a disadvantage. And of course, in some cases, you may not want to go for a leg lock, like such as a fight on the street. Probably don't want to sit back and try to go for a particular leg lock with a person trying to swing and punch you in the face. But at the same time, for the reasons that we were talking about them, people still said that they didn't work and they were wrong.
Yeah, well, and it's probably shouldn't be your go-to in a self-defense scenario, but if you do end up on the ground with someone that isn't terribly, nuanced or understands the ground game too much, you can control them with a leg lock. I mean, you can.
With the certain
we saw
positions,
that.
for sure.
Yeah, you saw that. Like, I think there was like that video on the basketball court.
Oh, the basketball court. Yeah.
I think he had like an outside Ashi or something. I can't recall.
He may have had like a 50-50 or something. But yeah, he's basically saying, I'm about to rip it.
It was 50. It might have been 50-50. But here's the thing. Like, you got to think, you've got basketball shoes on, dude. You got all kinds of grip. You got all kinds of purchase. They're not getting that leg out. You're not slipping that heel. And if you've got a big bulky tennis shoe on or a basketball shoe on. So, and I mean, he kind of kept them away in that video specifically, but I guess you can maim somebody, hurt him pretty bad, and then take off running if you have to. But
you could, I mean, I didn't really like that. Like because my thing is like, there's certain things when it comes to a self-defense situation, this is kind of on a sort of a side topic.
Sure.
With the self-defense situation, I think we talked about this before. People who don't know, right? Yeah. So for instance, putting someone who is unexperienced and untrained, you put them into a heel hook, they don't know. And they don't know what's about to happen.
Right.
So like, one, they could tear their knee and just shred it to bits, which again, may not bother you. But in a lot of cases, which is true for most of us, like we get into disagreements and we get into arguments or whatever. But at the end of the day, we don't want to destroy someone's ability to like walk or whatever. Now we'll protect ourselves and do whatever we got to do. Yep. But a lot of times, again, in the heat of the moment, we'll do things, but then afterwards we kind of have like a headedness. And so for me, I would rather in a self-defense situation be able to control the person so they can't hurt me, but also so they can't hurt themselves. And so I don't have to hurt them. And I can use things that they'll know, such as like pinning their arm behind their back and putting a knee on their neck or something like that. Like you're going to know what that is. Like that doesn't feel good. Or being able to, wrap them up and put them into a choke. Again, learning, if you do a proper choke, it's far more safer to the other person than putting them into a heel hook. Yeah. Because I mean, again, if you do it the correct way and you do it properly, like it's not such as you don't have to worry about shredding someone's ACL or sending them to surgery. Right. But again, to me, it just goes back to dogma, right? And so again, obviously, I'm sure most of you guys agree, the gi is not more technical than no-gi. No-gi is not more technical than gi. They're different. But again, it's one of those things you have to be careful about this, because I think like when jiu-jitsu came onto the scene and MMA came onto the scene, it was the thing that, Bruce Lee talked about this. Bruce Lee when you look at Bruce Lee, he didn't actually train under like a master for a long time, right? I think he trained for several years, but then he just started kind of dabbling everywhere, and his whole thing was to like his Jeet Kune Do, right, was not to be a style, it was to be this thing like, hey, bring in whatever works, and whatever doesn't work, get rid of it, right? And that was his whole idea. And even I think he said that, you know, if you took a wrestler and a boxer who had trained for a year in each of those disciplines, they could beat up the average martial artist who is a black belt because of the fact that they spar all the time. But Bruce Lee back, you know, was ahead of his time years ago, talking about this idea of, you know, the way not being like a way, right? Basically keeping everything open and not being dogmatic about everything. Now, I don't think that Bruce Lee was like the all-time best fighters. You'll see these posts online where it'd be like, what if Bruce Lee fought, you know, Conor McGregor or something? I was like, he would get destroyed.
Oh yeah, of course.
You know, because I mean, to me, like more than a fighting martial artist, he was a movie star, and he was like a martial arts philosopher. You know, and again, he took a lot of his stuff from like the Taoists and stuff like that. But again, you know, he brought that into the martial arts realm for a lot of American audiences. But the whole idea was the same, which I think is a really useful one, is you want to be, and I've talked about this before, you want to kind of be an anti-martial artist. You know, martial artists get locked into their particular, like their thing. You know, they get locked into, I'm a karate fighter, I'm a jiu-jitsu practitioner, I'm a Gracie jiu-jitsu practitioner, and all these things, I'm a 10th planet. They come with these things. There's nothing wrong with identifying as those things, but in your mind, you want to be, I am an open book. I am a technical mercenary. I will get techniques from wherever they come from. And I don't care where they come from. They can come from a whole other grappling sport. They can come from something else. If it works, let's bring it in and let's add it into the mix. And you want to keep that open mind, because it's one of those things where you see jiu-jitsu practitioners, they fall into these same traps that happened to the karate fighters and the taekwondo masters of the day back when MMA was getting started. And we were like, you guys need to keep an open mind about, you know, about these grappling stuff. You know, that was the whole thing. And then once we got into this, now we're like, keep an open mind about the different versions of grappling that could be potentially useful to us. But again, you have to be mindful of that dogmatic approach, because it'll happen to you, one, if you're in an environment that fosters it, but also two, sometimes we start to get good at something and we really fixate on that thing. And I think it was Emerson that said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that basically the thing that initially gives you some success, the thing that basically propels you to some heights of success, is also the same thing that, if you're not careful, can also lame you. Because if you get so good at something, it almost becomes a crutch. You lean against it too much, and you're not able to try new things and do new things, because again, you're clinging to this area that you know well enough, and that has become your place, and if you want to think about it this way, has become your identity in a way, right? You've become attached to this thing so much that you can't let go of it. I mean, we can all relate to this on some level, where you get good at something, and then when someone says, hey, try this position that you're not as good with, and you have to basically bite the bullet and get smashed by people that you could potentially beat, but because you're playing in a weak area, you can't do it as much. And so, you know, just again, you just have to be mindful of that stuff, because it can be a sneaky devil, and it can sneak up on you.
Yeah, I think when you look at people maybe being resistant to leg locks, that was one thing, right? Being resistant to leg locks. And then you got people that eventually, like, they would get into tournaments where leg locks were legal. And, you know, if you didn't know leg locks, you could have a very new blue belt handle a black belt. If you had, you know, this black belt had very traditional, or very kind of, I guess we can talk about old school jiu-jitsu, right? They had very basic jiu-jitsu, and we can talk about what basic jiu-jitsu is too, because that's kind of evolved over the years. You know, basics are kind of, I mean, it's such a relative term to, I think, the time period. But like, I think you have to evolve with jiu-jitsu, with like you said, different styles that come in. One thing that I've seen, you know, with the, you know, say Brandon at the gym, who's a 3-time national champion wrestler, it's like, you have to incorporate it. You can see, like, in certain rule sets or in ADCC, how impactful, how important wrestling is. If you don't have wrestling as jiu-jitsu practitioner, you're in a very, very big disadvantage. You at least have to have some type of anti-wrestling, I guess you can say that, maybe takedown defense, or ways to counter wrestle, or whatever it is. You know, I'm not going to try to take Brandon down, but I may try to, you know, anticipate what's going to happen and try to adjust my game towards wrestling. So I do need to know wrestling in that capacity as well. But, you know, I think we saw that with leg locks. people saw the impact and the effectiveness of leg locks. Now you saw, in ADCC, how those athletes with a very solid wrestling game, how well they did. I mean, it's just one of those things you have to evolve with. You can't just stick with like the very, very basic jiu-jitsu. Like, oh, remember like when it was close guard was like the position. You're not going to do that half guard stuff. That's crazy. Who would do that? That would never work. And then you saw half guard, completely take off and become its own thing. And then stuff branched off of that. And then you have open guard and all these open guards, butterfly, and all this other stuff. So I think like it's so interesting to see, quote unquote basic jiu-jitsu, and what is basic jiu-jitsu now as opposed to basic jiu-jitsu 15, 20 years ago. I mean, it's very different.
Yeah, it is different, and this is like kind of like another thing that happened in jiu-jitsu. You're talking about basics and everything else. There was another argument that popped up within the jiu-jitsu sphere was Gracie jiu-jitsu versus Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
I even had a guy ask me that question recently where he said, why is it that people rag on them back and forth? And I've been around for some of it, right? Because again, I know that when I was younger, especially, a lot of times us Brazilian jiu-jitsu guys who would do competitions a lot in fighting and MMA fighting, we always saw ourselves as a bit superior to the Gracie jiu-jitsu guys because we're like, well, they're just kind of like, they're not training as hard, or they're not fighting, they're not competing, and they're doing more self-defense stuff, and that's fine. But like, then if we rolled with them, we could typically get the better of them. This isn't for everybody, by the way. This is just the people that we ran into. And then the Gracie jiu-jitsu people would counter and say, well, we're doing this for self-defense and for fighting purposes, for realism. And we're closer to the source of the where jiu-jitsu came from.
Okay.
And you would see this bickering back and forth, you know what I mean? And for me, just as I get older, I'm like, look, do whatever you want. Like, if that's what you want, go there, do that. I like this, you like this, and that's okay. It's no different than one of the I got one of those comments. These come up all the time. Anytime you post like a video about jiu-jitsu and martial arts and self-defense, you always get a guy that comes in, well, why do I need jiu-jitsu when I got a gun? What I can throw lead, and
it's just I saw that.
It's such a bad argument because it's like saying like you don't need a bicycle because you have a car. They're completely different situations. The reasons that I would ride a bike are typically very different from the reasons I would drive a car. It's like saying, hey, babe, like we don't need to plant a vegetable garden outside. We have the grocery. Well, yeah, but we're doing this for a different reason, or I should go tell my wife, hey, babe, we don't need a horse. We have a car, But again, we do things for different reasons. And, you would use martial arts for a different reason than you would a gun. If someone broke into my home, like I'm not going to be getting ready to jiu-jitsu them, right? I mean, like,
sure.
I will grab my firearm, right? Because in that situation, this is bad news. Someone broke into my home, and my wife's sitting next to me, and we're not playing around.
Yeah.
But if I'm out, and let's say me and a guy have a disagreement, I'm going to try to de-escalate the situation first.
Yeah.
Right. And use the confidence that martial arts has given me to be like, look, I don't care about this. You can call me whatever you'd like. Just let's walk away now and let's end this. And then if for some reason things did go south, if you live in America or any like most Western countries, aside from some one-offs, most of the time the situation is very much a hand-to-hand thing. Right. And so if me and a guy have a disagreement, I don't want to kill some guy. I don't want to I don't want to possibly take his life or ruin his whole family and everything else. And maybe he's a father or something. I don't know. He could be a dummy, right? He could be drunk or something. I don't want to do that. I would rather be like, look, I'm going to take you down, pin you, and all right, get away from me. That kind of thing. And again, I know there's always these contingencies of, oh, what if the person has 3 other people? I get it, right? There's always this thing. But again, in most cases, if any of you guys have actually been into a fight situation or into an altercation outside of the gym, it's generally not as crazy as people are trying to make it out to be in these situations. Sometimes it can be, but most of the time, if you have a disagreement with someone, usually you can de-escalate the situation if you're smart enough to do so. And the last thing I would say to that is, besides the fact that being a disingenuous argument, well, first off, nobody asked anyway. But I guess the other thing would be, well, what happens if you are attacked by multiple people and you're unable to get away from them and they're grabbing onto you, and you're going to have to know some grappling to get out of a situation so you could possibly deploy a weapon, right? Because a gun, like, they say, like, the idea is, right, if someone has a knife, you run away. If someone has a gun, you charge them, get as close as you can, because if they're on top of you, you can't just whip that gun out. right? And so again, I just think it's another one of these things. My idea is better than your idea. The thing that I'm doing better than the thing that you're doing, and it's such nonsense.
So you would say, like, as far as talking basics, would you say Gracie Jiu-Jitsu maybe focuses more on the basics kind of position, self-defense, hand-to-hand, versus Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a little bit more sport-based? I mean, there is some, obviously, I think if you are a purple belt and world champion sport jiu-jitsu, you could definitely handle yourself on the street. Let's just say that's, even at this point now, blue belts. Absolutely. You got some blue belts that are extremely high level. Like, even though they don't train quote unquote specifically self-defense jiu-jitsu, those individuals can probably handle themselves pretty well. We've had people that were, a couple stripe white belts that got into altercations, I think, at their jobs, or even blue belts, and they were able to de-escalate and control the situation. And we don't do specifically quote unquote self-defense stuff. We do Brazilian jiu-jitsu essentially.
Sure.
So,
well, I mean, again, it really depends on the gym.
yeah, I'm just curious because we get this debate, and it's like, well, what are the distinctions that we're trying to make here?
Yeah.
Like,
So, and again, it's interesting, right? So, I mean, I've had gyms that basically, I've had students come from gyms that were like more self-defense oriented gyms, and they never did that stuff live. And so to me, it's like, well, you're not really training people. You're giving them a false sense of security, because if we don't actually train this stuff live, we don't know if this works. The stress test of doing it under live conditions is what the magic sauce of combat sports is all about. Right. It's what makes jiu-jitsu so effective, is the fact that we do this stuff in a live situation. And while rolling, yes, it has rules and stuff like that, what it does is it allows us to train very hard without being hurt. Right? Because if we said, okay, we're going to train realism all the time, so we're going to train on concrete, eye gouges, punches, everything's legal. I mean, you obviously wouldn't last for more than maybe a couple classes before your body was banged up. But you take out some of the things there, and you can train at a high level. You can become used to the chaos of a physical altercation with someone, and it allows you to then, if you are actually attacked by someone and you have to defend yourself with your hands, you can do so much more effectively. As far as the basics go, it's interesting. The basics, like what I consider the basics, have changed over the years. Not that they've changed to a great degree in the sense that they're not the same necessarily, but they've become more detailed, because there were things that we just didn't do back in the day. Back in the day, when you choked, if you were on back mount, you almost always fell to your top arm side. And you were told, if you fall to your other arm side, that it was kind of the wrong thing to do. Obviously, we do both now, and it's very effective. Leg locks, to me, are basics. White belts should be learning leg locks. If they don't learn leg locks, then they're going to be in a bad situation very quickly. And I mean, we've had students who have done really well in competitions as white belts with leg locks, right? And again, it doesn't mean that competitions are everything, but it's a good test to see how effectively you can use it against a live resisting opponent. I mean, one of our guys, he was outweighed. The guy he was competing against outweighed him by probably 80 pounds or more, and very athletic. Both were athletic, and our guy was able to get him in a leg lock, get him in an ankle lock. And so some of those are very basic, when back in the day it was like sometimes, whatever. And so there's a lot of different things that maybe would be slightly different, slightly fundamental, but I think the fundamentals are typically going to change from gym to gym, because when you think about the word fundamental essentially means like a building block. Like, it's a core block to building something. If you think of a foundation, it's something that everything else is built upon, right? Your house has a foundation. Well, your fundamentals are those. They're basically the building blocks that make up the foundation of what your game is based upon. And that, to me, will change depending on where you come from. Both Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but then within those systems as well.
Yeah, I agree with like the style. Like, if you are, we were kind of talking, if you train 10th at a 10th Planet gym, and maybe they have a certain curriculum. Like, I think Gracie gyms have a certain curriculum or certain things that they follow specifically, especially at the very beginner white belt levels. They have like a combatives type program as well. And I've never been a part of a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu gym, so I don't know, and I might be wrong here. But then you look at maybe a 10th Planet gym, right? If you have a very traditional again, 10th Planet Gym, you might be learning the lockdown as a basic position, or even a rubber guard as a basic position. I mean, obviously we learned closed guard, but then from there, from closed guard, you can start transition to that rubber guard, and that's a control position that is used heavily in some gyms. Now you got quite a variety in 10th Planet. Like, I mean, you go to one gym and they don't even, they don't even do some of these traditional positions or traditional, I guess, 10th Planet positions, but like there's quite a variety. But I guess it just depends on your gym and the style. And I mean, some I guess gyms may think that basics include solely the gi, and then no-gi is more of a, I don't know, maybe more of an advanced thing. But when I started, it was like I did both, but I did primarily gi. That was like basic, like jiu-jitsu basics were in the gi. A lot of times no-gi were like maybe even like for fighting and training stuff like that. Cause I mean, I think traditionally, initially, like, a world champion, if you look at the IBJJF, the world champion is like the gi. The gi's the world champion. But now you've got the no-gi guys, which it's kind of switched. And I don't know if I'll ever see it, if I ever anticipate that it'll switch back, just because of the popularity of it and the excitement of it. And the ease of it, right? You don't need a gi you can just literally wear some shorts and a t-shirt and show up to class and you've got everything you need. So I think there's a lot of, the barrier to entry is a lot less, you don't need a gi. And sometimes there's like, some people never even put on the gi. They get their belts thrown at them, they earn their blue belt. Like they just give it to them and like, it's all packaged up. It's never even been opened. It's never been worn, or like the white belt's never been worn. So, it's interesting. Like, I think it just adds to the openness of jiu-jitsu, which I think is really awesome. I think you can kind of play whatever style you want. And I don't know, we've had this discussion as well, unless we can talk about that. Like, some people, older grapplers, some of them prefer no gi as opposed to gi because they feel like the gi beats their body up a little more. But the gi is a little slower game, or can be in most instances. So I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I've heard both in that. Like, I've heard some guys say they're older guys and they like the gi because it slows things down. And then I've heard some older guys which is where I'm kind of at, is the gi hurts me more than the no-gi. Like, I can train more no-gi than I can gi, and I don't get hurt as bad. My fingers don't hurt. My neck doesn't get pulled on as much because of the collar. It's those kinds of things, right? Even like if you have an underhook or something, your arm just gets kind of caught up in the fabric a little bit differently than it does in no-gi. And so again, for me, I prefer no-gi, and I've heard a lot from a lot of people too. Now, the thing about no-gi is you get no-gi and then people are like going for guillotines and stuff like that. So, you have to be ready for that. And you can always tap, you can always tap fast. Like, sometimes, like when I'm training, if my neck is bothering me, I just tap really early to guillotines and stuff. I'm not going to try to fight them off as much. I'll try to fight them very early, but once I really feel someone have that pull on the neck, even if it's not the best choke, I'm just going to tap so we can just restart. And that's okay. That's that goes to losing your ego a little bit. As much as we, again, it's all these things. It's these things in jiu-jitsu. As much as we like to be like, you got to leave your ego at the door. Your ego is always there, and it will rear its head at any point it can, especially when we talk about an inflated ego, or an ego that's not necessarily like a gripped in reality. So like this morning, I tapped out to a guillotine from one of the guys because my neck's bothering me a little bit. And so because I just came back to training, so my body's a little sore this week. So I was like, I don't want to fight out of stuff too much yet. And I didn't do a good job of defending it early. He got a good bite on it. He started pulling. Wasn't choking me, but it was giving me that pull in the neck, so I tapped out. He even said, "Hey man, was that there?" And I told him no, it wasn't there. But again, he got a good catch, and I just wasn't going to fight it. Now, again, I could have got mad and say, like, bro, ease up on my neck or whatever. But again, it's my job to make sure that I defend those areas. And I even saw someone sent me a video the other day of I guess it was a blue belt and a black belt competing against each other. And the blue belt caught him in a heel hook or something. And the black belt wouldn't shake his hand. This is at some competition.
Oh, was that like
it's like a big guy and a smaller guy?
Okay, I don't remember.
I'm
looking at something else. I think
it was just interesting because you're like, I'm sure, that black belt, if he trains, probably tells people to leave their ego at the door or whatever nonsense that people like to say. but then again, when it comes time to practice it yourself, sometimes those words end up a little hollow.
Yeah.
And but again, sort of a side tangent there with that one.
I think there's pros and cons as far as if you're an older, like talking about older grapplers or kind of having your body feeling like it's beat up or not. I think there's pros and cons to gi and no-gi. I think yeah, some people say their body gets a little more beat up or their hands get a little more beat up in certain aspects with the gi. But again, in no-gi, you have less grip. So you do have to use the head a lot more for control, and there's a lot less attacks. The attacks on certain areas are more limited. But I think it also depends on your goals. But if you're just out there wanting to train, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't train both. Like, I think that can force it kind of gives you variety, and almost, like I like to say, like rotates the tires a little bit. I just think there's benefit to training both. For me personally, I don't, I just know how my body reacts, and it also depends on the style of game you play. Like, what kind of game do you like to play? If you play a lot of lapel stuff, you may feel more comfortable in the gi because you can slow and control the pace, and you don't feel like you're getting, roughed around and moved around as much. But man, I've rolled with guys like Clay, who is one of our black belts, who is like just moves all over the place. When we and him train in the gi, we are moving just as much as we are in no gi. Like, it's just because there's just the style of game that you play. So I think there's a lot of variables there. I think just doing whatever you love, what feels best to your body, how it feels, how jiu-jitsu feels to your body. And then outside of that, what do you do for your recovery and keeping yourself feeling good? If all you do is beat your body up and train all day long, it doesn't matter if you do just gi or just no gi or whatever, you're still probably going to be hurt. So it just depends on you and what you can tolerate.
Well, and that's really what it comes down to, right? Is understanding that, you should do whatever it is that you want to do. Like, as far as training goes, right? If you want to do gi, do gi. If you want to do no-gi, do no-gi. If you want to do both, do both. Do whatever you want to do. The issue is that if someone doesn't want it to do it your way, that doesn't make that bad or good. That is what it is. So, I mean, when you boil down to it, right? The coach that this guy talked to when we originally talked about this question, he's trying to validate his decisions. The gi is more technical than no-gi. That's why I train more gi. Well, not true. Why do you have to validate it? You don't need to validate it. You don't need to, then it's just a sign of neediness. You don't need to be needy from other people's validations. Like, if that's what you want to train and someone's like, oh, well, you should train, that's fine. You do you, I'm going to do me. And you don't need to justify anything. That's your decision, and just to run with it. And I think that sometimes people will try to justify certain things if they feel a tinge of something. Like, for instance, someone may know that they suck at no-gi because their game is so gi dependent. So, and simply just saying, you know what, and this is some of the things like our guys will actually admit this. They'll say, man, I need to work on my no-gi because my no-gi sucks, or my gi sucks, or whatever. They'll say this. They have no problem saying this. But if someone trains, let's say they train more gi and their game is based upon a lapel, and they're like, I don't want to do gi, gi or no gi. No gi is just a little too wild, too spazzy. They'll say those kinds of things instead of saying what the real issue is, which is, oh, you don't have a game that translates to no-gi, or vice versa. Some people will go into no-gi and then they'll say, I don't like the gi, man. It's just this and that, whatever. They'll make excuses instead of simply saying, hey, learn how to grip fight better. I need to learn how to grip fight better, because that's what it really typically is.
100%.
And so I think that sometimes people, instead of just leaving it as is and not having to cut the other side down, they feel this knee-jerk reaction. Instead of being able to just be confident in their own decisions, they feel needy to be validated, or to then talk the other side down so they can say, well, no, well, I'm doing this because it's better and yours is worse, or whatever, And again, just like the jiu-jitsu versus Gracie jiu-jitsu. If you want to do Gracie jiu-jitsu, that's cool, man. You do you. If you want to do Brazilian jiu-jitsu, that's cool, man. You do you. You don't need to talk negatively about anybody else. Just leave it be. Your decision is what your decision is.
Yeah, I agree with that. And also, what's your purpose for training? Like, what do you want to train for? What are you training for? Are you training to be an ADCC world champion? Well, you probably need to train more specifically to the rule set and the style and whatever. You may not be doing as much gi. Okay. You might probably have to focus on your wrestling a little more, do more no-gi. If you're doing the jiu-jitsu worlds in the gi, then you probably should be training more gi. I mean, it's just, what are you training for? And that can fluctuate, and you may find something you love. Like, I think training one versus the other, like it excites you. There's techniques, new techniques which excite me, like leg locks and stuff. There's a lot of excitement for me, like learning these new skills and trying to implement and using my black belt brain that I've got now in jiu-jitsu. Like I've got this brain of knowledge and information that I can maybe use those ways of learning to start to like develop and expand my game in leg locks and things like that. So I think just it's a knowing where you're good. And you can always, if you have a decent gi game, you're going to probably have a decent no-gi game for the most part. There might be areas you lack, but you should be able to. But it's just fun to start, like, you know, so you're not doing the same old redundant shit. Like, I'm going to get on top and do this choke and this and that. Like, you know, I don't even do loop chokes a lot anymore. I don't hardly, I mean, I'll go from time to time to use them to open things up, but that was like my thing. I would go for them all the time. Now, sometimes I don't even touch it. You know, I don't even like, you know, I'll do completely different stuff just because I want to play and open up new opportunities. And it's exciting to try new things. And sometimes you get a little beat up and sometimes you don't, but it's really important to, like you said, don't stick in that dogma and that like just completely have your blinders on and not want to experience anything else.
You know, everybody is going to have a natural preference or inclination to go in a particular direction if they're allowed to. You know, like for instance, our gym, we have a very loose curriculum. It's not even a curriculum. It's more of like a theme-based thing. But from there, it allows people to play. And so if you come into the gym, you'll find that lots of people have lots of different styles. And each person every person in the gym that's good is pretty well-rounded. But you will find that they become very good at a particular like area of the game. You know, and that's just the way it is. That's the place where they found success and they went down that rabbit hole. It's interesting. There's I was reading a book and they were talking about kind of the difficulty of the beginning, like when you're starting something. And they found that what typically happens is after you experience a little success, you get a little bit of validation from your group and you start to identify with that thing or doing that thing, that it's sort of then it basically, you have this sort of self-creating motivation because it's no longer something you do. You know, it's basically part of you, right? And so, for instance, it's no longer, okay, Evan does leg locks. It's like, no, sure. Evan's a leg locker. He's a good leg locker, or you know, whatever. Or man, like, man, Evan or Army Evan. Army Evan's got a great butterfly card, man. He's not a guy that just does some butterfly sweeps. He's like, no, he's a great butterfly sweeper. So you see this thing, and I think that probably plays a role where people experience some success with it, maybe because of their anatomy or their particular their mindset. You know, and I think typically a very aggressive person makes for a much better guard passer than basically just a more of a relaxed person who can just kind of lay back and let you come in, that kind of thing. But going to it, once they get that sort of propels it. And I think if allowed to, they will go down that rabbit hole so much easier because it just comes naturally to them. Yeah. Right. It's like, you know, but then there are some gyms where, and so I've seen this before, where they do not allow people to steer off the curriculum. Hey, this is our curriculum. This is your box that you stay in. And to me, that's like saying, hey, we have, you know, all the instruments that exist in the world that you could play around with, right? We're only going to play 5. Like, but what happens if you want to play the trumpet? We don't do the trumpet. Damn, I'd like to play the trumpet, right? You know, whatever it might be. You know, there's options out there you don't get to explore with them because you're being confined into a particular area. And so, again, I think that people will have those different areas of jiu-jitsu that they develop. And I think it's always good to have an area of your game that is especially sharp, that's yours, that's very good. And this will typically happen whether you like it or not. But you should definitely have a wide range of areas and knowledge, just because you don't want to be caught flat-footed. You know, for instance, I'm not the biggest leg locker, but I know leg locks. I practice them all the time because if I go against leg lockers when I'm passing, I got to know what those dudes are up to, right? And I've gone up against some pretty tough leg lockers, and I don't typically have too much trouble with it because I've done a lot of work with leg locks. Now, back in the day before I did a lot of work with leg locks, I was a sit and duck for them. If someone shot under my leg, I was just sort of, what's going on? And then I'm having to tap out, you know? And so again, this is another reason why it's important to work those weak areas of your game and not just the stuff that comes easy to you. All right, guys. So hopefully you enjoyed the podcast. Again, it was a couple different questions and ideas sort of sandwiched into one. But again, if you walk away with something in particular, again, the idea, I call it being the anti-martial artist, right? When I think of martial artists, I think of people that simply just get confined to their little box. And I would encourage you not to do that. Again, learn from anywhere, any source you can, stress test it, see if it works. And if it works, keep it. If it doesn't, don't worry about it. Keep an open mind. It's such an important thing. And it becomes harder and harder as you get better at jiu-jitsu. So, and as you get better at anything, it becomes harder to keep an open mind for new ideas because you get locked into, well, this is the way that I do things. Right. And so again, just it's something we all need to do in many aspects of our life. But it's something we can play around with in a great deal on the mats. Again, big thanks to our sponsors for helping make the podcast happen. Charlotte's Web CBD is the company. Again, I love the product. I think it's great. I've been using it for several years. It is a part of my recovery. I'm one of those people, my diet's good. I'm always trying to tighten that up. I have an ice bath tank at the house now, which has been great during the hard training in the summer months. You can jump in the ice bath afterwards, doing all those different things that everybody wants to do. And then supplementation wise, CBD is a part of that recovery. And I know a lot of you guys that listen to it, again, we know what it's like to want to improve our recovery from all the training that we're doing. And so again, I encourage you, if you've never tried the product out before, try it out and see how it assists you. I personally like it about 30 minutes to an hour before bed. And that's where I seem to get my best bang for my buck. I encourage you to play around with how you like it, to try to, whether it be the morning or the evening. But again, if you go to their website at charlottesweb.com, the promo code is JiuJitsu20 for 20% off the order. You can get the regular CBD products, and you can also look up some of the products that they have for people that get tested. And these are products such as the Edge product that they have on their website. If you look it up, that product is certified NSF certified sport, which means that if you were tested under, like, say, USADA regulations, you would be okay, which is pretty stringent testing. So you can check it out if you're interested in it. Again, charlottesweb.com, promo code is JiuJitsu20. Also, thanks to Roll BJJ.com. If you want to get some jiu-jitsu gear, t-shirts, rash guards, shorts, gis, whatever it might be, you would like cool designs, high quality stuff, check out rollbjj.com. The promo code is jiu-jitsu for 15% off. Also, if you are a grappler who likes coffee, which is, I feel like it's most of us, probably a good portion of us, coffee is the most widely distributed drug, I think, coffee and teas, then check out Choke Coffee Co. Obviously, it's ran by jiu-jitsu practitioners, and they do small batch coffee that's delivered straight to your door, fresh to your door. And they have interesting names, I think. They have several different blends. They've got a white belt tiers, which is their breakfast blend. Eugene likes that one. I had the Bolo blend, which is their espresso blend, which is like hints of chocolate and caramel. But again, they've got multiple different blends that you can try out. They're small batch, roasted as soon as they get the order, and then they send it straight to your door. And a portion of the sales goes to the Guardian Gym, which provides youth jiu-jitsu scholarships in certain areas. And so they have a gym. We've had the actual people that run Guardian Gym on the podcast before. It's a cool organization. So again, if you want to check them out, you can go to chokecoffeeco.com. That's chokecoffeeco.com. Promo code is jiu-jitsu for 10% off. And guys, if you'd like to listen to the podcast ad-free, we have an audio available of it ad-free, starting with this one, and in the future, any other ones, on our Patreon at patreon.com/the-jiu-jitsu-podcast. So you can listen to the podcast ad-free, and you can also get access to the exclusive library that we've been building with the podcast guests, videos, and different things like that for the last 3 years. Again, it's patreon.com/the-jiu-jitsu-podcast. And last, guys, if you guys would like to get my daily email, you can do so by going to chewjitsu.net/join, JOIN. Upon joining, you'll get access to some exclusive ebooks that I give away for free. And afterwards, you'll get my daily email following that. So, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed the podcast, and we'll talk to you next week.